everyone, I'm Mind, and this is set number 71485, Mateo and Z-Blob the Night Battle Mech from the LEGO Dreamzzz theme. This set contains 1,333 pieces, 4 minifigures as well as 2 smaller Dreamling figures, and it will retail for $129.99 in the US when it officially releases on August 1st, 2024. This set was gifted to me early for review by the LEGO Group through the LEGO Ambassador Network, but all opinions expressed in this video are entirely my own. This set is, of course, a LEGO Dreamzzz set, and just like all LEGO Dreamzzz sets, this set has an alternate build, and in fact, this set has 2 alternate builds. It's a 3-in-1. I will be covering all 3 builds in this video, so make sure to watch the video all the way through if you want to see them all. And also make sure to let me know in the comments which LEGO Dreamzzz set do you want to see an early review on next. But now, with all that being said, let's get into the review. So we're going to start by taking a look at this tiny little build because this is the only thing that doesn't change between the different builds of this set. But yeah, the set comes with this new molded Raven, and this comes in most, if not all of the sets this way, but it's a really cool new part. It's dual molded in black and trans pink, and it just looks super cool. The trans pink makes it look very magical, and it definitely fits the Neverwitch's whole vibe. However, the actual mold does just a great job to capture the bird shape. It's got an anti-stud on its feet at the bottom to hold on to something, and you can see this is what it's holding on to. These are the new collectibles for this wave, and they're like little memories or realms that are being captured. These are all based off LEGO Dreamzzz Season 2 Part 2, and we see a little bit of this at the end of Season 2 Part 1, but I don't have the full context as to what this is supposed to be. But yeah, you have this new like crystalline dome piece, which is very similar to the old dome piece, just now with like crystal shapes at the very top, and a printed tile on the inside. I think there's like 6 or 7 of these to collect in all the different sets, and they're all a different color and have a different print on them. In the case of this set, there's a print of Castle Nocturnia, which is of course one of the other sets from this wave, and this isn't exclusive or anything, it does come in other sets, but it is a cool thing to get here, and I like that the bird can grab onto it and like fly away with it. But now with that out of the way, let's take a look at the first main build of this set, the original version of the Z-Blob mech. Now, I'll be honest, when I first saw this set, I wasn't super excited for it. I cover a lot of mechs on this channel with the Ninjago and Monkey Kid and stuff, so seeing just another big mech from another theme wasn't super exciting to me. I thought it was creative, but I don't know, something just seemed off about it to me from initial pictures. But now actually having it built up and having it in hand, I am pleasantly surprised to say I actually really like this build. Because yes, we get mechs all the time in Ninjago and Monkey Kid, but this is so different from them that I think it stands really well as its own thing. The interesting thing about this set is that it's a more cartoony approach to a mech, which makes sense. Of course, Dreamzzz is an animated show, but both Ninjago and Monkey Kid try to make their giant mechs, well, mechanical because they're mechs. This one, though, uses a lot of rounded pieces, and you can see, like, very thin parts for the limbs, and it definitely makes the set more of a display model than an actual play model, but I think it's really cool that this properly stands on its own. So now let me move the camera up a little bit closer so we can take a look at the more intricate details of this build. Starting at the feet, there's like a somewhat sneaker design to these, which I actually think is pretty cool. There's little sticker pieces with, like, laces on them, and it says Blob for, of course, Z-Blob, because this is the Z-Blob mech, and that's present on both sides of each foot. Actual motion here on the feet is incredibly limited, probably one of the most limited I have ever seen. You can rotate it side to side ever so slightly and like up and down a little bit, but hardly anything at all. Honestly, this motion might as well not be here. I mean, the side to side does a little bit for posing, but really not too much. You're really not going to be posing these feet at all, like they do very little. However, something I like, they use these rubber pieces on the bottom that are typically used in like tank treads, and that helps the feet grip the ground to allow it to stand better. And there's also a tire at the back too, which serves the same purpose. It's rubber to create more resistance against the ground, so that way it's not as easy to knock it over. I love these large rounded pieces here, and I like how these smaller ones sort of fit inside them. There's no like awkward shapes or colors here, which is very refreshing to see after reviewing Nerja's mech from Monkey Kid. And then moving up the leg, you have like the Master of the Mountain armor pieces to be like knee pads, little wheels right here to keep things feeling mechanical, even though everything else is very smooth and cartoony. Oh, there's also stickers at the fronts of the feet that I almost forgot to point out. One has the word Blob written on it, the other doesn't, but other than that, they're symmetrical. And then the actual knees are these all-new pipe pieces. Now, these are very similar to the small pipe pieces that we saw last year on the smaller Z-Blob mech, but these are just bigger parts that accomplish the same effect. Unfortunately, because they are one solid part, there is no bend in the knees at all. That's like a pre-bent knee. You're not able to articulate it any further than that, which is a bit of a shame to see, because like in Ninjago, knees have become pretty standard for big mechs like this. But again, I like that this isn't just a Ninjago mech in LEGO Dreamzzz. This is distinctly its own thing. I think it's actually impressive they kept this so thin while being able to hold up the weight of the entire upper body. More just big rounded pieces for the upper parts of the leg, another Blob sticker, as well as the just like General Dreamzzz hourglass logo right here. The backs of the legs actually look really nice, which again, I'm very happy to see, because mechs don't always do that. Again, I'll mention the Nerja mech from LEGO Monkey Kid. That one was awful at that. So it's cool to see all this properly covered up, and it feels like it really fits this mech. There's even little stickers back here too. They just have little warning symbols on them, not too much going on there. And then the leg snapped onto the body on a standard like double rigid Technic joint. So you can kick the entire leg forward or kick it back, and you can also rotate it out if you want. Coming to the torso, it's thin at the waist, but it bulks up as you get higher. I actually really love the design of the whole like chest cockpit section, and this is the only part of the build that I believe stays the same between the 3 different versions. You got some nice stickers here. I love like this blue circle design, and then there's like another little warning symbol on this side. But yeah, the roundness of everything looks fantastic, like nothing looks out of place. And these like cascading angled slopes create some really cool texture. The head does use a printed piece at the front, which is always very nice to see, and I love these little spikes coming out the back of the helmet. And there's even a little brick-built neck, which is small, but I don't know, we don't see that too often. Usually the heads just come out of the body. Makes everything a little more interesting. And you can see there's a little bit of articulation here, nothing too crazy, but you can have it look side to side as well as up if you want. If you pull up on this windshield, the cockpit area opens up, and there's a ton of room in here. This is honestly one of my favorite details of this build, because like, look how spacious it is. You could probably fit 2 minifigures in there very easily. Now, Mateo's meant to be the one piloting this mech, but he has this really big accessory and this big jacket. So even if you take the accessory off, the jacket prevents him from sitting in there with another minifigure. But if you remove the jacket, you can fit 2 in there very easily. Or alternatively, what I like to do if I have the accessory removed, just throw it in here. Like, yes, it's big, and it doesn't fit while on Mateo's back, but it does fit in there with him, just close it back up. And that's so cool. I can't think of the last time I saw a mech cockpit that spacious. And it looks great, too. Like, you could still see Mateo in there. I would have liked maybe a printed or stickered console piece, because there's just a little grill piece in there, and I don't know, that's not super exciting. But that's not super easy to see, so I think it works fine for the purposes of this mech. But yeah, in general, the cockpit's super cool. I really love that. Coming to the back behind the cockpit, this is one of the only awkward parts of the build, because as I mentioned, everything is very cartoony, very smooth, very rounded. This, though, suddenly is just flat and has a bunch of studs, and I feel like it just doesn't really mesh well with the rest of the mech. This is a very easy customization to make, just put some tiles on here and it'll fit everything else really well, but it's just odd to me that it's not like that by default. The one use I could see for this is maybe additional seating for more minifigures, like you could have more characters sit back here, and that is definitely very cool for play, but in terms of looks, I think it would look better to cover it up, though I don't think it's the end of the world either way. There's a jetpack out the back here, and you can see each part of it connects on a ball joint individually, so you can move them around if you want. That looks really cool with everything else, and I feel like honestly ties the mech together. And then here's the actual back of the mech too, and just like the back of the legs, it's all very covered up, which makes me quite happy to see. These Tectic pins are maybe not the prettiest, but hey, at least the colors match. That's something a lot of other sets can't say, so I'm not going to complain about that. That's just how Tectic pins are. Not the prettiest piece in the world, but that's just the nature of LEGO. As I said with the legs, this is probably one of the best mech backs I've seen. And then we have the arms. The arms connect to the body on, again, rigid Tectic joints just like the legs do, so you can move them up if you want, move them back down, as well as rotate them a full 360 if you want. You've got these shoulder pads up here, and I love how these are connected. So you can see they could slide out of the way just like that, and it does that naturally if you're moving the arms up. Now, when you move them back down, it will look a little bit awkward, but that's very easy to plot back into place. But that's something a lot of mechs try to do, cover up the joints, and this has to be one of the best implementations I've seen. That's super smooth, makes sense in-universe, and the actual build tucks away really nicely. That's honestly another one of my favorite features of this set. The shoulder blades are different on both sides too. On this side it's printed, again it says Blob, and it's got all these arrows in blue and lime green. And then we have a stickered lime green hourglass piece, while on the other side it's white and it's unprinted. And we have these stickered blue and coral arrows instead. The top of the arms also serve as cannons with these 6 stud shooters in them, and these don't have a mechanism to shoot them, you just have to turn them manually. If you've never seen these before, you turn it and studs will shoot out. I'm going to try to block it because I don't want to lose these. Oh, okay, they still flew all over my room. Luckily, this set comes with extras. But yeah, if I wanted to, I could spin this all the way around and shoot out all 6. And that's the case on the other side too, for a total of 12 studs. As I always say with 6 stud shooters, they're a very fun toy, but they're a very messy toy. Because of the mess, I've never been the biggest fan of them, but I have to admit, if these came out when I was younger, I would have loved them. So I see why they're still included in sets. The elbow uses 2 of those new pipe pieces that the leg used. Once again, no actual bendable elbow there, you can only move it at the top of the arm. And then we have a giant hand at the very end with like these big fat fingers on the top, and this connects onto the hand with a rigid Tectic joint. Now I will say this is another one of the weaker parts of the set. I'm not a fan of that connection for a hand, I feel like it just doesn't make sense. It's way too rigid and not natural enough. I think a ball joint would have made a lot more sense. I assume the reason they chose this was for stability reasons, maybe the hands were too heavy with a ball joint, but it does make posing the arm with a sword a little bit awkward. I will say, I like the shape the hand creates from the arm when you bend it up or bend it down. That is very sleek looking, but it really limits posability as opposed to what a ball joint would do. And then we have the actual accessories in the mech's hands, which I think are fine but not the best. This sword I like in theory. The trans-like green Prime Empire blade pieces look super cool to be sword blades, but I feel like because of the size of this mech, the sword just looks super small. It looks more like a little knife than a big sword, which if that's what they're going for, okay, that works. But if they want like a big knight sword, which I feel like this is supposed to be, I feel like this should definitely be quite a bit longer. The shield on the other side I like quite a bit more. It is just a big disc piece, but I feel like it fits this set, and there's a little bit of motion to it too, which is pretty cool. Both of these accessories can be removed. The fingers hold them in place, so if you move them out of the way, they can just slide out super easily. And here's how that looks with the sword too. You can see there's just 3 Tectic holes in there to fit the accessory, and the actual fingers are in 2 sections. 1, 2, and there's also a little thumb at the bottom. Here's the bottom of the sword. You can see there's no actual connection, it just slides into place. And same thing with a shield, but with only 1 pin. And you, of course, have the freedom to swap the sword and shield around if you want. So now let's talk stability and posability. Stability is actually really good for a mecha this size because it's a huge build and it's super heavy. So I have to imagine when designing this was tough to get it to stand up and stay up. But luckily, as I mentioned, with the rubber parts at the bottom and the wheels, it does actually stand up pretty well and it stays in place. Like, you can even pose it like this with one leg back and it is able to stand up. This isn't to say it's like super easy, you do have to be careful when posing it because it is very top heavy. So if you lean it the wrong way and you don't have the feet properly balanced, it will topple over. But given the size and scale and everything of this thing, it's honestly super impressive. They did really good with the stability. However, that is unfortunately at the cost of a bit of posability. Because I do unfortunately have to say, this is probably the least posable big mech I've ever seen from LEGO. And that's just because there's so few points of articulation, so little they can do. The feet are hardly even a point of articulation, it's more to just adjust them to actually be able to stand up. But yeah, the arms can move out a little bit, the legs can swivel, and that's pretty much it. The hand movement's even a little bit awkward. Personally, I take this as this model's more for display than it is for actual play. You find a pose you like, you stick it in it, and you sort of just leave it like that, because there's not a ton of options you have. Because of its stability, I mean, it can be played with pretty easily, right? You can drop it down and it's not going to fall over. So it is a good toy in that sense, but if you want like a super agile, super active toy with a bunch of different options, this is not the mech for you, at least in this form. I have not built the other forms yet, we will see in a moment. But yeah, posability here, very, very limited, not a ton you can do. And then one final thing before I rebuild this is a very minor thing, but it's really bothered me in this review. There's no way to stand this mech up completely straight. Because of the bends in the legs, it's always tilted slightly back or slightly forward. Like, I don't know how well you guys can see because the arms are in the way, but if you look at the actual body of the mech, it tilts slightly back right now. And like, it looks okay, it's close enough to standing up straight, but it does feel a little bit off, like it should move forward a little bit. But if I move the body just one notch forward, then it's definitely leaning forward too much, and the head's like facing downward. So yeah, your options are either that, or that. There is no in between. Very minor thing that isn't a big deal, but it's just a little annoying to me is all. So yeah, for this build, all things considered, I honestly really like it. Visually, it's fantastic. I love how cartoony it looks while still being very stable. As a toy, I think it works alright if you're not planning on posing it. If you just want to like slam it around and fight things, it works perfectly for that. But if you want a super posable, like action figure style build, probably go with one of the Ninjago sets instead. Because while this is visually cool, it just is not that. And I think that's about all I have to say for this build, at least for now. I'll talk about it a little bit more at the end of this video. However, we are far from done in this review because we still have the minifigures to look at. However, this is a 3-in-1 set. This was only the first build. I still have to rebuild it 2 more times, so let me get started on that. I'll take this apart, rebuild it, and we can take a look at build number 2. Real quick before we take a look at the alternate build, I wanted to show you guys the instructions, because the LEGO Dreamzzz instructions are different than other themes. Everything's like actually fully illustrated and it tells a little story. So here's the first booklet. It's just for the cockpit in the middle of the mech. And there's this graphic on the first page, which I believe is in most, if not all, of the Dream sets. And then as you start building the different sections, you get different illustrations like this. This set has a total of 12 bags, and once you get to bag 3, this is where you put together the villains. You can see there's an illustration of the villains right here. And then here's where you pick what build you want to put together. Each of them come with their own instruction booklet, so the one at the top is the one we just looked at, the one in the middle is the Centaur mech, and that's going to be the last one we look at, and this one at the bottom is the one I'm about to build right now, and it's the Street Battle mech. Each of these builds does have their own instruction booklet, and you can see how big this booklet is. All 3 builds like have that much to the instructions. That's why it's taking me a while to put together this review, because I've had to build this, film it, take apart the build, rebuild the entire thing, and then film again, and I have to do that a total of 3 times. Anyway, here's the full illustration of the build we just looked at. Then here's the cover of the Street Battle mech, as well as the full illustration of that inside. And finally the front of the Centaur mech, and the full illustration on the inside at the end. So now let me rebuild the set into the Street Battle mech. And here it is all put together, and this is a very similar mech in terms of like actual build. It's got 2 legs, 2 arms. But the difference this time around is it's not really meant to be a mech for Mateo to pilot, rather it's a mech entirely for Z-Blob himself. A big change here is there's now little stickered Z-Blob eyes in the cockpit, which looks super cute, but this is one of my biggest issues with this build. Because this is not a separate cockpit piece, this is the same one that's used in the other 2 builds, but on those 2 you're not meant to have these eyes here. So if you do want to rebuild this set, which I do, I still have the Centaur mech to cover, you have to actually remove these stickers, which is very annoying, because the LEGO stickers aren't meant to like come back off and be reattached, no, they're meant to be permanently on there. A very simple solution to this would have been just to include 2 of this piece in this set, and you apply stickers to one, don't apply it to the other, and then each build either uses the stickered one or the non-stickered one. And I'm sure if you really wanted to, you could buy an extra of this part if you want to rebuild this set a lot. But yeah, from a toy design perspective, I really dislike that. What's the point of having a 3-in-1 if you can't properly do the 3-in-1 aspect? Building one of the builds makes you unable to build the other 2 in its correct form. And if you really want to, you can take the eyes back off, but then they're pretty much permanently off. You're not really going to be able to stick those back on. So if you're not planning on rebuilding this and you're just going to have this build together, these stickers work fine. Super cute looking, and I love the idea of the giant Z-Blob face. But we'll see how well that works on the Centaur mech when I rebuild it next. But anyway, the other aspects of the build, of course the rest of the cockpit is exactly the same. Where the head used to be, it's just not there anymore. anymore. However, it is still used in the build. If we open the cockpit up, you can see the entire head's actually stored in there where Mateo usually sits. Very similar build to the one we just looked at, nothing too different there. But anyway, coming back down to the feet, the actual feet are very similar to the one we just looked at. The top's been changed up a little bit, now they have the Master of the Mountain armor piece right here, but the bottom parts of the feet are exactly identical. The lower leg, however, is quite a bit different. You still have this green rounded piece right here with a gray piece in the center. However, those large white rounded pieces are no longer a part of the leg. Instead you have the printed pieces, which used to be a part of the shoulders, now serving as knee pads, and I honestly think those look really good. They incorporate into the set's design really well. The tops of the legs are significantly smaller this time around. You can see those warning symbol stickers have been brought to the front here. And this does make the overall build shorter than the previous one. I'm not sure exactly how much shorter because I don't have both side by side. I had to rebuild the old one to get this one together. But the proportions honestly seem really natural here, like it doesn't feel off at all. The back of the legs isn't as smooth this time around, but I still think it's pretty solid. Lots of stuff's covered up, and there's a few like awkward studs and blocky pieces, but all things considered, it's still pretty great compared to other mechs. And then probably my least favorite part of this build is the waist where the legs actually connect to the body. They use like this gray rectangular Technic brick, and that's just not covered up at all, and I feel like it feels very out of place. Just like with the other build, everything else is so smooth and sleek everywhere on this build. And this is a color that doesn't really match a ton, like it's not blue or white or lime green that's used in most of the other places. And all the open studs and the technicals, it just looks a little bit awkward from almost every angle. I think that could be improved by putting some like bricks or tiles in there, but by default it does leave a little to be desired. Torso I already talked about because that is exactly the same as the other build, just of course with the Z-Blob eyes now. However, there's now like these giant engine type things above the cockpit, and I'm not sure exactly what these are supposed to be, but the Prime Empire blade pieces look great here. It sort of gives the mech like a rabbit-esque design with two ears coming out the back, though I'm not sure if that was intentional. But it's all very sleek and high-tech. I think it fits Z-Blob really well and also just looks super cool. We've got some really nice shoulder blades on the back here too to cover things up a bit. And that section with the studs back here in the previous build is not present on this version, so I do think this back section looks quite a bit better. The arms still connect in the same way on these rigid Technic joints, though I love the shaping on them this time around. They use a similar build to what was used for the hands of the original build, but how spherical everything is looks super good. And just like the original, mixes mech and cartoony super well. There's still these pre-bent elbows with no articulation in any way, and then the hands also have no articulation, which is a step down because the hands on the original had articulation. However, there's barely even hands here, instead it's just giant cannons. And this is where the 6-stud stud shooters have been moved to. I'm not going to fire them again because I already did that once in this video, I'm sure you guys know how they work at this point. But yeah, this definitely feels like a more offensive form of this mech. And I feel like the stud shooters fit this vibe a lot better than the sword and the shield did. Posability and stability here feel about the same. Obviously, it's a bit less posable because there are no hands, so your only points of articulation are at the hips and at the shoulders. This build does feel a lot more top-heavy than the previous build, and I think that's largely because of like the giant blasters at the top. Though I guess technically there is a bit more motion on the foot now, though it is still fairly negligible. So posability is about the same, very limited, and in fact more limited because there are no hands now, and stability is slightly worse this time around. So my take on this build is very similar. If you're going to display it, find a pose where it stands up well and just leave it like that. You don't have a ton of options, but you can definitely find very easy ways to make it stand up. And if it's being moved around for play, it's much better to just grab it and move it around like this than to properly pose the legs. And I think that's all I've got for this version of the build, the Z-Blob Battle Mech. Overall, between this build and the previous one, I think I slightly prefer this one. Even though the movement's worse, the movement still wasn't amazing in the first one, and this just feels like a more cohesive design to me, even though I did really like the original. So yeah, between the two I prefer this one. However, we're not done just yet, there is still one more to look at, so now let me rebuild this one last time into the Centaur mech. Real quickly, before I get into the last and final build of this video, I want to quickly ask you guys to please like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. As you guys can see, this video took me a while to make because I built, rebuilt, filmed, etc, etc. So if you're enjoying these reviews and you want to see more, liking and subscribing does a ton to help support me in the channel, and also helps put my videos in your feed more often. So thank you all very much for your support, and now let's get back to it. Here is the third and final build I'll put together, the Z-Blob Centaur mech. And from initial impressions, this was easily my favorite of the three, hence why I built it last, because I wanted to keep it together. However, now actually having it built up, I do actually think it's the weakest of the three. It's certainly the most unique given the fact that it has 4 legs as well as 2 arms, and I do like the overall silhouette, there's just a couple of issues with it. First I want to talk about posability and stability, because it's really weird on this one. There are no points of articulation at all on the back legs or the front legs. The back feet are on ball joints, so those can move a little bit, but the front legs aren't. And that's literally the only point of movement in the entirety of either of the legs. Now, something they do that I kind of like is there's a bit of looseness to the connection here, and it's not loose in the sense where it's going to fall apart. Like, this is a very sturdy connection, but it has some give to it, so you can move the legs around a little bit. From a posing perspective, this changes literally nothing because you're not able to hold any of these poses, but it makes the build feel a little more alive because even though there's no actual motion, this gives the illusion of motion. And that's the case with the front legs too. The other weird thing is the length of the legs don't match, and it makes the entire build a little unstable. Because if I stand this up straight, you can see the front feet are touching the ground, but there's a lot of room under the back feet. Of course, you can just drop that down, and because the back feet are mini ball joints, you can make those flat against the ground. But the front feet aren't like that, so then they're always pointing in the air. So it never really feels like this build's firm on the ground, it always feels somewhat wobbly. I think this could have been solved in a few ways. Number one, putting ball joints in the front just like they had at the back, or just making both legs the same length, like either of those would have worked. But having neither, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, the build still works, right? It just feels a little bit awkward when moving it around, and it makes it a lot less stable too. Because this build is very front heavy too, because of course the entire torso's at the front as well as the weapons, so if you even just lightly push this the wrong way, it can topple over. And that's something that's not at all the case with the other two versions of this build. But anyway, in terms of actual design, I mean, I think things look pretty good. Very similar to the other two, of course. These big panel sections are still knee pads, just like the last one we looked at. And the upper part of this leg looks pretty nice. The front legs use 2 of the pipe piece, while the back legs only use 1. And the feet at the bottom are very, very small, which does make some sense. It's meant to be hoof-like, and the legs are pretty thin. But I feel like a little more bulk there would have been nice. Not a ton, but just a bit more to make it a bit more stable. And this is even more obvious on the back feet, because they're literally only 2 parts. Again, visually they look okay, but again, stability is the biggest issue there. To help with stability, they did put those rubber pieces on the front feet, but that only does so much. I feel like you need more of them, like 4 per feet, otherwise the surface area of what's actually being stood on is not very much. And it would have helped to have them on the back feet too. I love the upper part of the back legs though, that shape looks really good and fits a Centaur super well. Here you can see where some of the stickered parts are reused, as well as the stickers on the back. And there's a look at the body too, which is a little flat and rectangular, but honestly it's good enough for the purposes of this set. The tail at the back's super tiny, which is a little bit funny. I kind of would have liked if that was a bit bigger. Like if they'd used one of these pieces, it would have been awesome. But this is an alternate build to a set, so I can't be too critical. Coming up to the torso, it is of course the same build as the other versions of this set, because that does stay the same. I have left the Z-Blob eyes on from the previous build, even though those aren't technically supposed to be there. So let me remove them super quick so you can see how this build's supposed to look. And this pains me to remove stickers from a LEGO build. You're not supposed to do this ever. Okay, I got them off alright. They're a little bit bent and crinkled now. I put them back on the sticker sheet. So if I wanted to rebuild this, I probably could reattach them if I really wanted to, though obviously they're not going to look as good as they just did. Regardless, having to take off stickers to rebuild a set just feels like very bad practice to me. As I said with the previous build, they absolutely should have included a second of this piece. One to put stickers onto and one to leave stickers off of. The face is very similar to the original version. Once again, it connects on a ball joint and there's a little bit of motion there. Single spike out the back now, and the sides of the head protrude a little bit more. And then the arms are different, but they connect in the same way all the other ones did. Once again, I think the shoulders look fantastic this time around. That really rounded shape was done super well. There's a pre-bent elbow here, and you would think that's like an actual point of articulation because you can see a joint down there. However, this piece right here prevents that from actually bending. Now, I'm sure you could very easily customize this by just removing that part to make the elbows actually bend, but by default, the official build of the set, there is no motion here. The only movement is at the shoulder. Then at the end of the hand, this green disc piece represents a shield, and again, there's no actual motion there, but you can move it around by moving the entire arm. And the other arm is mostly the same. There's the printed, like, LEGO Dreamzzz hourglass logo right there. It's cool to incorporate that more prominently into the build. And the weapon on this arm is a giant lance, which is actually really awesome. It's one of my favorite details of this version of the build. Just like the other two versions, there is once again stuff on the shoulders. This is where the 6-stud stud shooters have been moved to, as well as the Green Prime Empire blades. These are in a ball joint so you can move them around and actually aim them. And of course, yeah, there's one on each side. So overall, I do still quite like this version of the build. I think the idea of a Centaur mech is super cool, and I think it's very impressive they did it in an alt build. That being said, a lot of times with LEGO Dream sets, the alt builds don't feel like alt builds. They feel like they could be the main build of the set. And I could say that very easily about the other two builds we looked at. Like, I feel like either of those could have been the official build. This, though, while it's solid for what it does absolutely feel like an alt build. I just feel like a few aspects of it are a little weird. I don't like that there's no articulation on the legs, and I also don't like how wobbly they are. I don't like how front heavy it is. I feel like a tail at the back really could have counteracted that. And the fact that all 4 feet can't go completely flat on the ground at the same time is pretty disappointing. So if this was the main build of the set, I would be like, it's alright, but it's a little disappointing. However, this is one of 3 builds in the set. So all things considered, I'm pretty happy with it. But I'll talk about that and the other 2 builds a little bit more at the end of this video. However, we're not done with everything in the set just yet, so now let's take a look at the minifigures that it comes with. So here are the first 2 minifigures in the set, and the entire gimmick of this wave is that all of the good guy characters have like evil doppelganger counterparts. So here we have our main character Mateo and his evil counterpart MadTeo. Starting by taking a look at their accessories, I love Mateo's accessory. He's got like this giant goo tanker out the back, which I assume has to do with Z-Blob, and they use like this whip piece that comes from LEGO Avatar that was used to connect the Avatar figures to like the animal creatures in those sets. So it's cool to see that used outside of Avatar, and it honestly fits this build really well, and it brings the goo from that tank into like this little blaster that he has in his hand. The, like, hilt of the blaster is an all-new part for this wave. It's an hourglass that has stud connections on each side as well as a little handle at the bottom. And already, I love how versatile that piece is. We see it used in other sets as, like, the hilt of a sword, but it fits this build really well, too. It's dual molded in gold in that, like, lighter trans green. And then there's, like, a goo lightning shooting out the front, which that's an amazing part. When I was a kid, I thought the lightning piece was the coolest thing in the world. I always wanted it, and when I finally got it, I was so happy. So I'm glad to see it's still coming in sets today, because I still get excited when I get it, and I'm sure kids today really love it, too. The entire tank connects to like this jacket vest piece that Mateo is wearing, and that's an all new part for this wave. And I've talked about this in other reviews, but I have very mixed feelings about this part. On the one hand, I think it looks good. For what it's supposed to represent, it does a pretty good job. On the other hand, it just doesn't feel very Lego-like to me. And that might just be a personal thing, but I don't know, in my mind, the only thing that should go around the neck is like armor. Jackets or vests are just like not big enough to be molded instead of being printed. Something about it just feels a little off to me, and that might just be a personal thing. But on the flip side, with that piece removed, I'm not the biggest fan of how his torso looks without it. He's wearing like this blue flannel shirt that's opened up, and I think that looks fine. I just don't think it works super well as a vest. I think this could be majorly improved by giving him blue arms instead of white arms, and that's very easy to do. However, he does not come out of the box like that. So between the two versions, definitely prefer him with the vest on. It's just the vest doesn't feel super Lego-like to me. Still though, I like the print in the center at the very least of his undershirt. He's got a little design of Z-Blob there. I think that's super cute. And then the absolute highlight of this figure is the leg piece, because this is phenomenal. It's dual molded, and it's got side leg printing, and it's got toe printing. On one side, he's got like little crayons or something because he is an artist. That makes sense. And then he's got these super cool looking shoes with like this logo on it, and you can see that around the front too. His hairpiece this wave, he still has the green streak in his hair that he had previously, though now he has a red streak too. And his face print's a little different this time around too. He has two new expressions, one with like an open mouth smile, and the other with a little smirk. But then the other difference is he now has the Z-Blob goo dripping down his face, but it's like coming down further. Previously it just like matched the pattern of his vitiligo, but now it's like significantly more prominent, which is an interesting change. This guy is a very common minifigure this wave. So far all three of the sets I've reviewed have had him in it, but he is a really great minifigure. They went all out for their main character this wave. And then you can see MadTeo is very similar, just with a lot of the colors swapped around. First off though, talking about his accessory, he comes with a giant evil pencil. Mateo's accessory in the first wave was always a pencil, and he doesn't have it in this wave as far as I've seen, but it is like his iconic accessory, so it makes sense for the evil version of Mateo to have one too. Of course, the colors are swapped around, but it's still very clearly a pencil, and I like the little gem at the bottom to be an eraser. That's very cute. Removing that though, you can see the hairpiece is the same, except it's black with magenta streaks in it. The legs are very similar, though the logo on the shoes has even more squiggles in it. That's a very small thing, but probably my favorite touch. Also, the like crayons or whatever have been replaced with spray paint cans to, I guess, be a more evil form of art or something. And you can see some of that paint is like splotched in his pants too. There's a little skull in his belt, which is really cute. And then, of course, in the center of his torso, we have Blob instead of Z-Blob. He does use that same, like, vest jacket piece, but it's in gray instead of blue. And there's his full torso print with the vest removed, which again is very similar to Mateo. It's a little tattered and ripped, which is a cool touch. And then you can see the two face prints are very different. He's got this magenta makeup instead of the Z-Blob effect, and that matches the makeup on the Neverwitch, who's, like, his leader. And on the other side, he's got an angry expression. One kind of weird thing about this figure is his legs aren't dual molded, even though they look just like Mateo's legs. I assume that's for budget reasons, and MadTeo's legs do look fine. It's just weird to see these figures are so similar, but that's like one very obvious difference. But yeah, these two are both easily some of the best of this wave. I really like them both. And then here are the other two full minifigures in the set. We have Logan and his evil counterpart Dogan. Unlike Mateo and MadTeo, these two don't have like the same outfit, and that's because Logan has a new Season 2 design, while Dogan is based off his Season 1 appearance. This is my first time covering the new Logan minifigure, and this guy is actually really cool. I quite like him. Just like Mateo, he has dual molded legs in bright orange and like this lighter blue, and those two colors really pop against each other, and I really like the sort of ripped printing at the bottom of the shorts. His jacket's pretty cool too, with a red on one side and blue on the other. And then he reuses like this hidden side hat hood piece, but it's got that hourglass logo on the top. Here's how that piece looks if you turn it around if you've not seen it before. And the hourglass around the back is super cool. I actually really love that print. Taking the hood piece off, here's a look at his alternate face. You can see on one side he's like angry and he's got these red eyes, and on the other side he's happy and he has yellow eyes. Now, he does not come with his hairpiece in the set, which he normally does. However, one very cool thing is if you want to give him his hairpiece, just take it from Dogan, put it on Logan, and that's how it's supposed to be. He just has a hockey stick as an accessory, which is a good part, but it's a very common one for him. I think he's had it in most of the sets that he's come in. So yeah, obviously not as detailed of a figure as Mateo, but honestly really good looking. I like the colors here a lot, and this feels like a big improvement from his Season 1 design. But then Dogan is really cool too. Once again, he's not as detailed as MadTeo, and again, I think he could have really used some dual molded legs, because like the legs being completely magenta from the side looks a little bit weird, because you can see his pants are meant to come down. But I do love the magenta skin on him. I love that they didn't just make him a pure white like they did the other villains. No, normal Logan's blue instead of yellow, so this guy's magenta instead of white. And his expression's fantastic too. I love like the little vampire fangs, and he even has like the little bit of fur that normal Logan has too. Turning him around, there's his alternate face with a very angry expression. And then he's got this new armor piece too, which is a very small part that's dual molded in black and trans pink. And I think that's an interesting part. It's not like as prominent as it expected to be, it's more just like extra flavor to the figure. It doesn't really stand out a ton, but I kind of like that. It gives more focus to the actual minifigure design and not the armor, but it just adds a little bit more to it if you want. Removing the armor, there's a full look at the torso and leg print. He's got like the Neverwitch's symbol in the center of his torso. And just like MadTeo, his clothes are like very tattered. There's tons of little rips in them, as well as like little scratch marks down here. And then the back of his torso is probably one of my favorite details. He's got like these 3 big scratches through the back. And that's because on the original Logan design, he has this logo that looks like 3 scratches, but it's just a logo printed on the back of his outfit. But for the evil version of Logan, they take that 3 scratch logo and turn it into 3 actual scratches. That's such a cool detail. So yeah, obviously not as good minifigures as the previous 2, but I honestly quite like these guys as well. The new Logan especially is a lot of fun. And then finally, the last 2 figures in the set are 2 of like the evil nightmare Dreamling creatures. We have Sneak and we have Snivel. Sneak wasn't in the first wave of sets, but he was introduced earlier this year, but I'm very happy to get him again. He was a very important part of Season 1, less so Season 2. But since he wasn't in the first wave of sets, I'm glad he's so common now. And he's a very cute, very fun little figure. He's got like this little animal body with a tail at the back, and the tail can hold onto a bar accessory if you want. He doesn't come with one in this set, but you can give him whatever you want to hold. And the face print's cute too, where you can see his fangs and he's drooling. There's the head with the hairpiece removed, and there's no alternate face on him. But yeah, this guy's becoming more common because he's coming in more sets, and I think that's a very good thing. Love this little dude. And then Snivel, I'm surprised to see is still here because he absolutely is a villain from the first wave. But he does have one of the more unique designs. He uses like the giant Thanos head, and he's got this fire coming off the top to make him look like a little bomb. And the actual design of his face is disturbing, but it fits a nightmare creature perfectly. I love the little eye printing on his torso, and he comes with a little sword too. And then around the back, yeah, nothing going on. He's one of the smaller Dreamling figures, so there's not a ton of detail to him, but he is one of the more detailed ones. So it is nice to get him again here, though I would have preferred some of the new characters from this wave. And so, overall, what are my thoughts on this set? Well, right off the bat, I want to say this is one of the most impressive 3-in-1s I have ever seen. This video took me a few days to make because I had to build this set, film a review, take it apart, rebuild it, film the review, take it apart, rebuild it, film the review. And with a set this big, that takes a lot of time. So I think it's very impressive they made a 3-in-1 from such a big set. And 2 of the builds are really, really good, and the other one's solid, it's just not as good. So if you're looking for play value for your money, like if you really like building and rebuilding, then absolutely this would be a set I recommend. I don't think you're gonna find a better deal for something like this. Even LEGO Creator I don't think has 3-in-1 experiences that are this good. But then the actual builds themselves I think are pretty solid. Visually they're super cool looking, very unique for a mech, which is a good thing to say because we get a lot of mechs, so when one stands out that's amazing. However, posability is definitely very limited. Like if you were used to what Ninjago or Monkey Kid does, this is not that. If you don't mind restricted posability, then absolutely this could be something you like. But yeah, the posability is easily the weakest part, though the stability is pretty impressive on the first 2. The minifigure selection, I like what you get here, but I really wish you got more because this is a $130 set. Only 4 full minifigures and 6 if you count the Dreamlings is not great. Honestly, 1 more good guy and 1 more doppelganger would have done a lot, and maybe even throw the Neverwitch herself in here. I don't know, if you're paying over $100 for minifigures is very disappointing. So I would have liked to see a bit more there. Piece count for the price is perfectly fine, and size for the price, I think it's about on par with what I'd expect. Maybe it could be a little bit cheaper, but you gotta keep in mind the 3-in-1 aspect and not every piece is used in every build. So the price isn't like incredible or anything, but I think it's fine for a set like this. Doesn't strike me as like super good or super bad. So would I recommend it? I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're just a mech person, you want cool posable mechs, then go for Ninjago or Monkey Kid. I don't think this is for you. But I think if you're a fan of LEGO Dreamzzz, you like Mateo, you like Z-Blob, this is a really cool one to pick up. And if you're a huge mech person and you want all the mechs under the sun, this isn't like a bad one. This is still super cool looking, and definitely different from other ones you have in your collection. So I think overall, yes, I would recommend this set. Obviously, it's not going to be for everybody. It is a giant, huge mech. For $130, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't interested. But if this is a set that piqued your interest and the lack of posability doesn't bother you that much, if you do decide to pick it up, I don't think you'll be disappointed. But of course, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think of this set in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And let me know in the comments which August 2024 LEGO Dreamzzz set do you want to see an early review on next. But as for this video, I think that's about all I have to say, so thanks for watching everybody, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!